Did you know that Sly 2 is fucking awesome? Even after all these years since its release, it still holds up great. Not just as a platformer, but an amazing game overall. It's kinda sad that there are no games like this being made anymore. I mean, technically there are, but I'm meaning games that appeal to a younger audience, but still have stories interesting enough for mature players as well. And not only that, the gameplay is hell of a lot fun too. Yes, I do have a heavy nostalgia for this game, but I will do my best to keep that out of this review and try to take a more critical look at the game. So I hope you enjoy the video. Just to note quick, I recorded the gameplay on an emulator on my PC, and that is the reason why you might see some little hiccups in the pre-rendered cutscenes, for example, or some of the material looks a bit blurry, and that is because of the emulator. After the events of the first Sly game, the Cooper Gang managed to locate the lost Clockwork parts. Clockwork was the final boss of the first game, and one of the people who killed Sly's dad, slash parents. But it turns out someone beat them to it. The Claw Gang, a group of high-stature criminals scattered around the world. So now the Cooper Gang has to locate the Claw Gang members and get the Clockwork parts for themselves. Talking pretty much anything more about the story will go into spoiler territory, so even though this is a very old game, you have been warned. The game has been split into 8 chapters, all of them acting like they're little contained stories, but also do have a purpose in the long run as well. Most of the chapters are split into 2 parts as well. Well, actually all of them except the first one and the very last one. I like how this time the villains get way more screen time and building compared to the first game. They aren't all equal to one another, and the game acknowledges that by having more plot-heavy chapters with lesser villains, and the more character-focused chapters have the most focused villains as well. But of course the focus is not only on the villains this time, and the main trio takes the center stage, and they get way more development compared to the first one, especially Murray and Bentley. Murray has been completely transformed from the predecessor, and it is for the better. In the first game he was literally just the driver of the gang. That's it. This time though,
Underfloor!
he is even playable as a character, and also he is like strong as fuck. And I'm gonna talk about Murray a bit more later. So in the meanwhile, let's talk about Bentley. He is also a playable character, as all the 3 characters are now too. And oh boy, was he done perfectly. Not just story-wise, but gameplay-wise too. I will get to that gameplay stuff later, but yeah, Bentley is awesome. And possibly has some of the best moments in the entire game. In chapter 3, when Sly and Murray get imprisoned, Bentley has to conquer his fear and work alone to save them. Bentley, you know, the scared little turtle who was afraid to stay still in his first mission, now has to break his friends out of a high-security prison all by himself. One of my favorite parts is chapter 2. And why? Well, first of all, it has great missions and a lot of different types as well. Also, it has this very silly tone throughout the whole chapter, and it's just a joy to experience. It makes sense to have this chapter be a very lighthearted one, as afterwards the next 3 chapters will be the most serious and dark ones in the whole series. As I already mentioned, in chapter 3, the Cooper Gang loses and Sly and Murray get captured, so the next chapter will be about freeing them from the prison. But there is more going on. For example, Murray, whilst in prison, he was being force-fed drugs that had a severe effect on his mental and physical state. That is dark for a kid's game. And in Chapter 5, people are being held captive by the Contessa and being mentally tortured and brainwashed. I mean, like, Jesus Christ. Good thing that after Chapter 5, the game takes a tiny break and the following 2 chapters are very chill and light. But at the ending of Chapter 7, the Cooper gang loses again. That was a very surprising twist that happened twice, and it worked brilliantly. For pretty much every story, it is rare for the heroes to lose, especially in stuff that is meant for children or a younger audience in general. But here it happens twice. Bold move, Sucker Punch. Bold move. So, right before the start of the final chapter, the gang is at its lowest. And the stakes are the highest as the final Claw Gang member has all the Clockwork parts and is rebuilding Clockwork. So yeah, that is a really good premise for the finale. But wait. There's more. Neela, who has betrayed everyone in the game thus far, betrays Arpeggio as well. Arpeggio being the bird, Neela being the tiger. And, well, she takes the Clockwork parts for herself and fuses herself with them. So, Clockwork is once again alive. And the final boss is against him. Or her. In this case. Okay, I guess. I mean, it is definitely better than the checkback part in the original, but the boss fights in general aren't the best part of the series. Sly manages to defeat Neela, Clockwork, aka Clockla, but at what cost? Bentley gets fucking paralyzed, and Murray has been mentally scarred for his life and even leaves the gang later. Sly sacrifices himself for the gang and finally even gets a moment with Carmelita. But as there is a Sly tree, somehow Sly has to get away. And he does with the help of his friends who left him a little surprise. A bittersweet ending, so to say, and it did leave me with a good feeling. And I love that the shit that happened throughout the game actually affects the characters. Murray and Bentley will never be the same after this. Consequences are important. And for some reason, they never show this shit in children's stories. Like, so many times the main characters go through so much shit, but it has seemingly no effect on them. And they just live happily ever after. It doesn't have to be anything super intense and dramatic like losing your legs, as in this case, or getting mentally scarred and being depressed. But there has to be something, some change in the characters.
Let's dance!
The atmosphere is set brilliantly, and every chapter has perfectly mastered the style combined with the setting. Paris has a calming accordion, Canada has a guitar, and the scary dark prison has, well, a scary and loud piano. Also, every operation has its own soundtrack, and the operations being the final missions of every chapter. And I love how they added this James Bond vibe into the existing soundtrack with the French horns. The horns are also a huge part of the combat themes. The more action-packed moments deserve more tense music. But I like that they didn't go overboard with it and don't just use typical orchestral stuff, but they keep the same style, but just amplify the horns and the blades to make it sound more grand and epic. The best part about this track is that the composer managed to keep the song's pace low enough so it doesn't feel out of place in a semi-slow paced game like Sly. Sometimes games struggle with this and have the combat themes be just fast drums and epic strings. But that doesn't always work. Of course, sticking to the basic style and atmosphere of the level/game is the most important part, but the pace is what perfects the fit. Doom Eternal may have some extremely amazing combat music, but it wouldn't fit a game like Deus Ex, for example. Even though they are both shooters, Doom is a very fast-paced and bombastic, and Deus Ex, on the other hand, is a slow and methodical. And the composer knows it and creates the songs around it. I also like a lot that they have the Cooper Gang leitmotif playing in most of the ambient songs, if not even all of them. The best one is in chapter 8, because I love how they managed to take the chill and calming Cooper strings and made them sound so desperate and terrifying. Fucking brilliant. I'm gonna divide this gameplay section into 4 categories. The first part is exploration/world design. The biggest change from Sly 1 to 2 was the introduction of proper hub worlds, where most of the missions take place in. All chapters have their own unique area to explore, and all of them are dripping with atmosphere, from luscious jungles to haunting Victorian cities to snowy frontiers. Most of the maps can be separated into sections, and all of them use landmarks to their advantage. The first map in Paris has a huge nightclub in the middle of the map, and the exploration area goes around it so you can see the nightclub at all times. Also, there are tinier landmarks like the water tower and the outside disco area. Every map has these 30 collectible bottles that are extremely easy to find, and as I sometimes had collected all of them by the time I had completed only the first 2 or 3 jobs on the map. This is not necessarily a bad thing, as yes, it does become more difficult to get all of them depending on the map, but being easy enough to not feel annoying. Also, they are completely optional, which is great. If you collect all 30 on a map, you will be able to go unlock a safe located somewhere on the map that contains a brand new ability for Sly. So I'd say collecting them is worth it. There are also these optional valuables in every map that if you manage to take back into your hideout without taking any damage, you can sell them for in-game money. Very neat. And well, with money you can get even more new abilities. This is not the only way to make money, as you can just steal money from enemies, or just kill them and they'll drop money that way too. Smashing shit also gets you money, so just go ham, I guess. My 2 personal favorite hub areas are in chapters 2 and 6. In the second chapter, the map is an Indian palace. The golden sunset with the calm music in the back set the chill and laid-back atmosphere perfectly, and the clear but complex enough map design makes it pleasing to explore with all 3 characters. Which will, by the way, become later a slight problem, as some maps are a chore to explore with Bentley and Murray, due to their high verticality. Chapter 6 has one of the flattest hub areas in the game, with a big mountain in the middle. The safe house is located in the docks with some boats, and going forward from a tiny town you see a beautiful frontier of Canada. As some of you may know, I'm a big fan of snow levels in video games. And this one is just gorgeous. Someone's messaging me while I'm recording. How dare you? Anyway, the slight snow on the ground, the chilly looking ponds and rivers flowing through the map are so calming. Also, trains are running through the map constantly and you can take a ride whenever you want. And there's a bear, and, well, bears, and even Carmelita. And all of them roam around the map, attacking everything they see. I just love the atmosphere in this area, and the music just makes it even better. Seems a lot like the devs favored Sly heavily when making this game, and that makes sense, as the game is called Sly 2 after all. And it isn't even necessarily a bad thing, as movement and exploration with Sly is leagues above the other two when it comes to complexity and fun. And that is simply because of the thief parkour that of others can't perform. With the press of a single button, Sly can climb ropes, run along tiny ropes, slide down vines, hang on hooks, and so much more. Also, later in the game, he gets a glider similar to Link in Breath of the Wild, and it is a shit ton of fun, and will be crucial when it comes to traversing the maps in the latter half of the game. The next section is combat, which varies from good to horrible to way too easy. As you know, Murray is the brawn of the gang, so he has the biggest damage output when it comes to melee combat. He can two-shot most of the enemies in the game, and with some abilities even one-shot. He can even throw other enemies into each other to deal huge damage. Bentley can't do much when it comes to full-on combat, and that is due to lack of strong melee attacks, but what he can do is shoot a sleep dart and blow people up, which one-shots them.
Kyllä ne jaksaa odottaa.
No.
I guess that's one way to do it. Oh fuck.
Sly's melee combat is very close to Murray's, but he does less damage and has way more cool abilities to tackle encounters. So I think because of the lesser damage and more varied attacks, Sly's combat overcomes even Murray's. But Murray is the one to pick when it comes to overcoming huge numbers of enemies. In Sly 3, Sly actually becomes extremely OP when it comes to close quarter combat, and he's like, if not as strong as Murray, maybe even stronger. The third section is about stealth, or more likely Sly's gameplay plus Bentley at the beginning of chapter 4. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, as I mentioned Bentley sucks at combat, so you're gonna have to focus on not getting spotted when you play with him, but I will get into that more detail soon. So let's talk about Sly. Again, Sly is the main character when it comes to stealth, for two main reasons. He has a one-shotting sneak attack, and his parkour abilities allow the player to use platforming to bypass enemies. Also in this game, Sly is the only one who can pickpocket enemies, which will be a huge part of missions throughout the game. Bentley does get the same ability in the sequel though. The actual stealth part is very simple, as some enemies even have flashlights and that highlight their field of vision. The small enemies don't have these, but their field of vision is very small, so sneaking past them is extremely easy. This game has a fixed difficulty and no New Game Plus, so the experience sadly can't be enhanced with a harder difficulty for more experienced players. I do like that the game isn't too easy though, so that can be a serious problem when it comes to many children's games. Most have multiple difficulties and some even New Game Pluses, but still, nowadays so many games are just so easy even on the hardest difficulty. As an example, let's take the Ratchet & Clank series. The older games on harder difficulties could be sued for rape, as they will destroy your ass in seconds if you're not familiar with the game. Also, the New Game Plus mode bumps up the difficulty even more, as it always should. But in the PS4 remake, I played through the whole game on the hardest difficulty and died twice, if you don't count failed platforming sections. Both times were on the same boss even. That wasn't even the final boss. And the New Game Plus is even easier, as your weapons at this point will be so powerful that you can one-clip almost all bosses in the game. Sly 2 manages to beat so many games when it comes to balancing difficulty, and it only has one. The last section is gimmicks, or everything that isn't part of the base gameplay, so to say. So basically shit that comes up only once or twice during the whole game. As an example, the tank sections. They suck some serious ass. The controls in these sections are retarded. You control one thread with left analog stick and the other with the right one. So to go forward, you gotta push both sticks forward, and to turn, you have to push the other one back and the other one forward. So there's no separate button to aim. So if your target is not right in front of you, to aim you can't move forward at the same time. Why can't I just control the tank with one stick and aim with the other? I guess we'll never know. One of these gimmicks that I do like is the RC Chopper. Basically, you just get an overhead view from the sky and you drop bombs on people. It's that simple. But what makes it effective and not too boring is the way the chopper moves. The easiest way to describe it would be that the chopper is on ice. So when you turn, it drifts a bit more before making a complete turn. There are a few parts in chapter 6 where the RC gameplay just becomes an arcade game. And it is a lot of fun, to be honest. There is also this hacking minigame where you control this little ship and shoot stuff. Very simple and quite easy. And a good thing is that it doesn't come up too many times during the game. If there was one negative thing to say, it would be the turret missions. Obligatory turret sections in video games can suck a dick. Like, please devs, get rid of these, and if you really want to have them in your game, just make them a small part of a bigger mission, like in Uncharted 2, or integrate more gameplay mechanics to it than just shooting a turret. For example, have enemies trying to rush you, and if they get too close, the player has to hop out of the turret to deal with them close quarters combat style. Or have multiple fire modes in the turret to deal with specific enemies, for example. Sly 2's story still holds up to this day, and the pacing is top notch. There are no real low points that come to mind, and that is a huge challenge when it comes to game making. Yeah, some missions can be pretty tedious and whack, but even those are minor inconveniences. The art style is gorgeous, and the map design is near perfect. Apart from Chapter 3, that kind of sucks to navigate with Mente and Murray. So, Sly 2 is a good game and you should go play it. Bye.